Welcome to Signals and Stories, a Cairns Oneil podcast. I'm Robin LeGassicke, our Chief Transformation Officer.
And I'm Kelly Miller, Managing Director.
Cairns Oneil is a Canadian independent media agency. We focus on developing strategic media plans and executions to really focus on delivering client outcomes.
On this podcast, we're going to be unpacking the signals that are shaping our industry and the stories that are really shaping us. We're going to be chatting about all things media, marketing, advertising, as well as some of the more untalked about things around leadership, ambition, burnout, as well as our experience and what it's been like for us raising families and growing our careers at the same time. You and I spend a lot of time together in a variety of formal setting with clients, without clients, discussing things like brand growth, the future of what brands look like, the impact of media, as well as looking at some strategies on how us as agencies can really work with our clients to help them grow their business and optimize. So this is really a format where we get to uncover some of those things that we're talking about daily in a more open setting.
So when you think about Signals and Stories, Signals will focus a lot on the tools and the technology, ad tech, martech, where that's going, the ever-evolving landscape that we have to work within. And stories are really about the stories behind the people and looking at what's worked, what hasn't, and unpacking that and really digging into understand how that's going to impact the future of us.
Whether you're in marketing or in an agency, this podcast's for you. It's for everyone early in their career trying to figure out their path, those managers in the messy middle dealing with the roadblocks that they're seeing every day, as well as senior leaders like us who realize that we're all still trying to figure it out. On future episodes, we're going to interview guests who are having a major impact in our industry around what we're doing and what we're seeing every day, as well as we're going to look at some campaigns that are active in the market and do some hot takes and headaches, which gives us a little POV on what's happening on the industry. But for today's episode, instead of having a guest on, we thought we would start with each other so that you as the audience can get to know more about us, who we are, what our career path looked like, and why we're creating this podcast. So, Robin, you are my colleague and my friend, and we came together working 3 years ago at Cairns Oneil together. And I feel like I know so much about you from quick lunch breaks and coffee shop visits or a glass of wine at the airport in between meetings. And I know about you in fragmented pieces, and I've heard so much of your story in that way. And I'm really excited to have this forum to have a more intentional way to learn about you, learn about your career path, because it is really interesting. And you have such an incredible reputation in the industry, everything that you've accomplished. And you've also done it while raising children. And now you hold an executive role with teenagers as well, trying to manage that, which could be the harder executive role that you may have. I really admire the path that you've carved out in this industry, especially for women. And I would love to dive in. You're our Chief Transformation Officer here at Cairns Oneil. I want to know more about that, but I ultimately want to know how you got here and what that journey looked like. And I think we see across no matter what industry you're in, people never end up to the exact place that they envision when they start something. So would love to know what that looked like for you from the beginning.
Yeah, it is. Thank you for that great introduction. It is a very interesting path that I took, but I started out going to school for advertising and media, which is very rare in this industry that people start and go to school for this and then continue in this business, especially media specifically. There was a program at Humber College that I went to that was really focused on media, and I loved it, and I got a job right out of school. And my first job was at a media agency, and I thrived in that environment. I dug in, I was curious, I worked hard, I did all the things that I needed to do to learn as much as I could to advance as quickly as I could. And I'm what's called a boomerang because I left agency side a couple of times, but always found my way back.
I love that.
So, yeah. So After working agency for a little while, I thought, I'm going to try my hand somewhere else. And I went vendor side, and I went and worked at the CBC. I had a really special place in my heart for the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. I thought I would learn something new, get a different perspective, understand how that worked. And it was great. I learned a lot and I enjoyed my time there, but I always felt like something was missing and the pace was very different from what I was used to. So I went back agency side and continued to get into more of the strategy side of agency. Loved what I was doing. Again, still continued to grow and move up the ranks in terms of a supervisor to a manager, working on both strategy and execution. And again, kind of felt a little bit of a pull to see, what else is out there. How can I find something new that's going to challenge me? And so I continued to look at, different agencies. I moved up again. I started to manage larger teams, larger books of business. But I felt like there was a disconnect between the agency value system and my value system. And so I wanted to make changes at the agency, but I got to a senior level where I started to realize I didn't have the capability and the power to do that within a Canadian agency within a holding company system. And I say that because in a holding company system, you have to work within that system. And as Canada, you're a small part of that system. So you don't necessarily get to make the changes that you want around how client contracts are executed, how operations run. And so there's a construct that you have to work within that isn't always aligning to the type of leader that I wanted to be. Meaning that I had to focus more on P&Ls and more on, what the agency and organization wanted than focusing on the people that I was trying to mentor and wanted to see the best work come out of, as well as my clients. I felt like I couldn't advocate on their behalf as much as I wanted to. So I sidestepped again and I went client side and really enjoyed my time client side. I went to a large direct-to-consumer insurance company where I was helping them launch within Canada. I got to learn so much about ad tech and martech in that role. Also internal operations, how clients operate, what the executive level looks like within the client system and how, to work with that and work within that system. And I loved what I was doing, but again, I still felt like the pace wasn't what I was looking for. Frankly, I was getting a little bit bored only working on one thing. I was so used to working across such a diverse client set. And so I started to think about, well, what's my next move going to be? I don't necessarily want to go back to a large global holding company, but I was feeling the pull to agency. And that's when David Cairns and Sherry O'Neill reached out, which is the founders of Cairns Oneil, and said that they had an opportunity and they hoped that I would come talk to them about it. So I did. And they talked about an agency that was built on a values base that really fit with mine, and that they wanted to grow and build out their digital product and really service clients in a partnership way. And it just fit with what I was looking for at the time. And so 7 years ago, I joined the company and did exactly that. Have worked really hard to build out our digital practice, our, consultancy with our clients. I work on, what ad tech, martech, AI solutions we can bring to the table, all of those things. And I love what I do.
It's amazing. There's so many things in there that I'm so interested in and that I love to hear you say. First of all, around values and what you were doing corporate side and how that aligned with your value system personally, because I think that, for a lot of people is what brings them success through that type of fulfillment and having that alignment, because if that alignment's off, nothing really feels like it's working right. And I also loved, and I see you do this every day, about challenging the systems that you're in. And when things don't feel right, challenging what's there, pushing things, and you really continually do that. We were talking about linear career paths, how all of those things came together. And, while this does feel linear with sort of these side tracks that happened with going client side or to different publishers and things like that. It really does feel like you had a lot of great foundational puzzle pieces that came together really nicely to build where you are at now and bring all of those things together. But I'd love to know, as you made these moves and progressed your career, were you always confident in the decisions you made and the moves you made? Or were there moments, of recalibration and realization that maybe this wasn't the right place for me and made some quick changes?
I mean, I don't know that I was ever truly confident in decisions that I made, with the exception of coming to Cairns Oneil. I always questioned myself in, am I making the right decision? Is this going to, am I going to be able to do this job? Number one, there was a little bit of that, capabilities and sense of, what's the word I'm looking for? Imposter syndrome. Like that is real. And it was real throughout my career in terms of can I do this? Am I capable? And I think part of that is because I am a bit of an A-type and I have very high standards for myself. And so I'm constantly wanting to overachieve, not just achieve. But that said, you make a decision, especially when you're stepping out of agency, going somewhere else, that it's going to be good for you in one way, but you're always going to question, was that the right decision? And there was a lot of that over the years. And I'm very glad and grateful that I did take some risks and that I did take those side steps, because it got me to where I am today. It got me the knowledge and the foundation, like you said, that I was able to build on, for sure. But there was 1,000 times that I questioned, is this the right thing?
So in that, was there ever a time that there was an alternate path where you really thought your career was going in a different direction than what you anticipated?
When I went client side, I thought I was going to stay client side. I really did. Part of it was that I had become very sort of enamored and disengaged with the large holding company model. And I just felt like that was no longer for me. And I thought that going client side, I would be more capable of making some of those changes in terms of working with the procurement departments at global holding companies to, recalibrate what a contract should look like and what that agency client relationship should be. And I did do that in the role that I had, and I was able to make some of those changes. And I do think that I was successful in my role client side. However, there was just something for me that was missing, and it didn't have that same pace. It didn't have that same learning experience, and that's really what I love about being at the agency is we're always learning something new. We're always building for the future. We're pushing our clients forward. I get to work with some of the greatest, smartest people in the industry. There's no other, I have not seen or felt another industry that is like ours that allows us to do all the things that we get to do.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And what's really interesting about that is transformation is in your role. And that's what you were really just talking about, is how our industry changes and transforms. And, some of the solutions that you bring forward to us as a company are really around that and innovation, technology, and all of those things. But what really does transformation mean to you right now in your career and in your current role?
So I look at transformation across a couple of different areas. One is going to be people, making sure that our people are upskilled and ready for the future and what the future is bringing. It's built and based on consumer behavior, though, right? When you think about how consumers are evolving, what they're looking for, immediate gratification, all of those things that changes within a consumer's behavior is also built on technology and how technology is evolving. So those are the buckets that I look at it under, and making sure that we as an agency are set up in those areas. So evaluating the different technologies that are coming out, how we leverage them, how we can capitalize on them for our clients. What do we need to build for ourselves? What do we maybe need to build for our clients? Those are the areas that really are how I look at transformation, and making sure that we're engaged in that we're ready for that, and that our clients are engaged in it and are ready for it.
Absolutely. Very interesting. I'm going to switch gears and get a little personal here. But I would love to know a little bit about, growing your career while having little kids and then now holding an executive role with teenagers and what that really looked like for you. And was there moments along this path where you really thought that you couldn't do it all because you have done it all, but maybe you didn't always feel that way? And my follow-up question to that is, do you see parallels in leadership at a company in your career and managing your children too?
Yeah. Uh, Definitely building a career and having children at the same time is hard. It takes a village. And I wasn't sure many times if I was doing the right thing for my career or for my kids and family. But somehow we navigated through it and we managed, and I had a great support system. And yeah, looking back in hindsight, I'm grateful for what I had, and I did focus on making sure I could be present in both areas by having certain boundaries around things. At the time, though, in the moment, you don't always feel that way, for sure. In terms of managing a household or managing children and then managing at work, yes, there can be a lot of similarities because I look at rearing my kids as it's my job and my intention to motivate them to be the best that they can be. And sometimes it's like herding cats, and sometimes it's giving advice, and sometimes it's, telling them that they did a great job on something. And sometimes there's some tough feedback I have to give my kids too. But it's the same thing in the office in terms of sometimes it's like herding cats, and sometimes it's mentoring people, and sometimes it's giving tough feedback, and sometimes it's, really celebrating the moments where the individuals have shone. So yeah, definitely some parallels.
There's definitely parallels there. And I think, a thorough line is about celebrating successes and wins all around, whether those are little career things happening daily or the things that are happening at home daily, and focusing on that part of it because that's really what shines through. I want to talk about identity and drive for a second. And if you zoom out a little bit, what keeps showing up for you in terms of what's motivating you now and who you are?
I'm a problem solver by nature. My natural tendency is to solve a problem. If somebody brings something to me, I'm like, that's it. How do we solve that? Which, can be good and bad depending on the situation. But because of that, then I'm looking to build. So I'm always looking to build the solution, build what's next. How do we fix this? How do we get there? What do we need to do? How do we push forward? And I think that we are in such an exciting time in our industry where there's so much changing and so much evolution, especially in technology, especially in what clients are looking to deliver every day, that just excites me every moment of the day to just push forward and continue to build.
Awesome. Okay. And finally, we're going to do a bit of a leadership question here. I want to know about your top 3 things that it takes to be a leader. And I want quick answers here and just 3, not 20, because I'm sure you could list 20.
So I would say listening to hear, not just to respond. So really make sure that you hear what is being said. The other would be focus on solutions and outcomes, not just problems. I had a really good boss that taught me that years ago. And then last but not least is being true to your values. I'm really a firm believer in making sure that what you're doing aligns to your value system.
It's incredible. And we've seen that as you've talked about it, as we've had this conversation about that value system, which is incredible. Thank you for all that. And, now that you've been in the hot seat for a little while, I think it's only fair that we change gears for a minute.
So I'm excited to flip the switch a little bit and talk to you. We've talked a little bit, you and I, about your past, about your path to get to Cairns Oneil. and I'm excited to unpack it a little bit more in today's conversation. You are managing director, overseeing some of our largest accounts, and you're also responsible for e-commerce and the customer journey pillar. Plus, you are also a busy mom and with some very active children. So sometimes I wonder how you get it all done. But I want to start with maybe talking a little bit about your career path, because you use a term that confuses me sometimes when you say that you had a backwards career. And I want to talk a little bit about what that means. So tell me how you got to today and what backwards is all about.
For sure. I do use that term, and I think that it's a little niche-y within the agency and marketing world. But generally, we see a typical path. I'm going to say 9 times out of 10, what happens is people start their career on the agency side, getting to know really the ins and outs around media or creative agency as well. And it's really detail oriented. And they get really focused in that. And then they connect really well with one of their clients and get involved in that business and have a passion for it. And they move over to what we call client side. So that would be an internal marketing team. I say I did it backwards because I did that in reverse. And I started my career in a marketing team with an independent company that was privately owned, that produced health and beauty products in the Canadian and US market space. And that's where I started my career. And it was a really, really great starting place when I look back on it now. We were a small company with a small marketing team with limited budgets. And there was a lot of advantages to that when I think about it in perspective to a lot of different places that I've worked with, because what that really taught me in this smaller environment was about collaboration, was about being feisty and hungry for ideas, and really looking for solutions that weren't the typical path of big brands where you could invest a lot of money into brand growth through media and things like that. As a junior person starting out in a smaller marketing company, I had exposure to everything involved with that marketing team. And there wasn't a lot of egos there, which was nice. I was able to talk directly to, the VP of marketing and sales and have that perspective from them and learn from really senior leaders like that, as well as the rest of the marketing team, whether they were doing product development or, the other side of marketing as well. So overall, that experience gave me so much exposure and so much opportunity that I didn't really understand then because I didn't know any different. But what was really great about that is it was opportunity to do things that were thinking really about innovation and different ideas. And I was able to do things like launch e-commerce, launch social media and digital marketing within that company, because it was really about finding different solutions to bring brands to the forefront and make them successful. So that was really how my career started. And I spent a long time at that company because there was so much opportunity and everybody was so passionate about making what we were doing successful. And that was a great environment to be in, honestly. What I did from there was I was able to take what I had grown and built in terms of digital marketing and e-commerce to larger global companies in the food and beverage space, in the CPG industry, which is consumer packaged goods, and build out new sets of teams that were sort of being done for the first time, which were almost like internal agencies with inside marketing departments. So I was looking at revisiting how shopper marketing and retail were all coming together at that time, because those two things were merging, and we're still seeing a lot of that shaking out and how that's all happening today, as well as having the social media aspect and digital teams really collaborating with one team inside a marketing department. So I was working at a variety of global food, bev companies and developing those teams there, which was great exposure to larger brands where I had the opportunity to have money to invest in media and really understand that side of things as well. So from there, it felt like a natural progression for me when I went to a global media agency from there. And I had the opportunity to bring all of that knowledge that I had and I was seeing on the marketing side of how to launch brands in e-commerce space, how to build them, how to grow them successfully. And I could see the gap and the things that brands internally were struggling with in getting those things off the ground. And I could see opportunity working with an agency, how we could bring some of those solutions to marketing teams and to clients. And that's really where there was a lot of opportunity and where it was a really exciting move for me to be able to scale what I knew and had been able to grow in a really larger format. But I think similar to you, as I went down that path and I was working for larger companies, I felt this pull back to the roots that I had about being with an independent company and having that hunger for growth and building something and feeling like I was really contributing and adding value into building something. And that was what it was really about. And that's what led me to Cairns Oneil. And I also really missed the in-depth that you could go into with a brand and building it and having that connection and seeing it grow over long term. And that's where I feel most happiest, I guess, for lack of a better word, about growth and building.
Wow, it is a definite interesting path to get to where you are. But you've kind of talked about backwards previously as if it was a bit of a flaw almost. And in hearing this story, it definitely, to me, sounds like an advantage. So I'd love to hear if you think starting client side gives you an advantage now in terms of what you're doing today.
I would say when I started agency side, it definitely felt as an insecurity because agency people have so much knowledge around their craft and what they do. And honestly, I spent a lot of early days in meetings not understanding a lot of what was happening. I just didn't have the exposure and the direct agency side experience. But I think I'm always willing to learn and learn quickly. And I was able to do that. But I also quickly had this perspective and I had a lens on, I could see what was amiss in terms of where the agencies weren't always seeing what was happening in marketing teams on the other side. So I think I ended up having an advantage, and what I could bring to the table was an understanding of what those marketing teams were really looking for from their agencies and how we could fill in that gap. The understanding of what marketers were dealing with at a bigger boardroom table internally, how they had to report things to CEOs and CFOs about their business and performance. And so being on the agency side, I could have that perspective of here's what we could deliver that's going to help that marketer tell their story internally and where we can really bring additional value to them. Versus just trying to, do a lot of things that are focused on making us as an agency shine and perform really well, but having that understanding from the flip side about what the marketer values and what's going to be important and critical to them. And I think ultimately being proactive about bringing some of those things to the table and solving some of those problems ahead of time and having that understanding really developed a different level of trust with clients and a better understanding of their business overall.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that in action when we work together. So yeah. You also, I want to reflect back a little bit when you talked about your journey. You said it very casually about launching in e-commerce and social when it was super brand new. Clients hadn't really started to even invest in those areas, and you were sort of first to market with the client that you worked with. That's a brave and pretty bold approach. And what really made you lean into that when others were not ready?
So yeah, as I mentioned, the company that I was at the time, we were feisty and hungry, and everything was about exposure and awareness. And interestingly, without a lot of media dollars to do that, you're forced to look for new ways to do things. And at that time, before digital marketing was really mainstream and social as well as e-commerce, there was very few ways to launch a brand into the market, and they were all really costly. So whether it was TV commercials, radio, or print advertising, those were sort of the mainstream ways of getting brand exposure. So I was lucky enough to work in this environment where everyone was open to all ideas, and you were able to come forward where you could see areas. So in terms of e-commerce, with a goal of distribution being a main one, coming on to different platforms at that time, Walmart.ca was new. Amazon was just sort of expanding, beyond what they were known for at that time to be able to deliver more products to customers, as well as niche things like Well.ca and stuff. It gave an opportunity to have that distribution into different markets. And a lot of times we see in the space of health and beauty or food and beverage, brands with really low single-digit growth or declining growth. And in the e-commerce space, there was big growth. You were starting from zero. So there was nowhere to go but up. And there was definitely challenges in terms of things like supply chain, understanding how to do it. So it was a risk. I had great leaders who were willing to try things out and give things a go. And I did see that as I grew to different types of, consumer packaged good brands too. Everyone I worked with could see that opportunity, and you could quickly prove some ROI on the e-commerce platform too. So that was like really quite valuable to be able to see that. And then in terms of the digital and social media side, again, that was really about brand exposure and awareness and being able to test and learn in a really small way to start and then scale from there. And that's where the opportunity was. It was on Facebook at that time when they had just launched their advertising platform. So really great opportunity to have a bit of investment, show how you could expose your brand to a wider variety of people than those traditional formats for a limited budget and scale from there. So there was definitely risks, but there was great opportunity, and that ability to show the growth was really where the opportunity led.
It's great. I'm sure your client at the time appreciated it. So you spent about 15 years client side, then moved to the agency. What was the biggest challenge in that, or what was the biggest opportunity? You can look at it either way, challenge or opportunity.
Yeah, so I think the opportunity to go agency side for me was to take my knowledge, take what I had learned, and build that across large global brands at a bigger scale. So I think I work at a fast pace and I like to move things along quickly. So for me, hey, I know exactly what to do here. I know how to make brands grow in this space. And I know what brands and marketing teams are really missing and striving to have that they can't scale quickly. So the opportunity was really to go agency side, be able to scale that quick and provide that to a large variety of clients, those business solutions that I knew were needed and were missing. Challenges along the way, getting that off the ground was harder than I anticipated. And there are a million steps really in the process when we think about e-commerce and, like I mentioned, that supply chain and all of the behind the scene things that are happening there. What I didn't anticipate was that would take longer than I thought. Well, I had the solutions. The adaptation of that was going to take a bit longer.
Yeah. And I think it's definitely worth noting that until you've really worked client side, you don't always truly understand the nuances and the challenges of what they're facing when you're planning for some of those things. So yeah, I think that's a great perspective. So I want to ask kind of one maybe last question.
Mm-hmm.
Taking it again a little bit more to the personal side of things. Like you've managed a really successful career, and you've balanced that with raising young children. And I'm a mom as well. I know how that works or sometimes doesn't. But I'd love to hear your perspective on how you managed that.
Absolutely. So you said earlier the exact same phrase that I would say about it is that it takes a village. And, it really did for me. I think I had a really great perspective that might be different from others, where I really felt that the more people that were involved in my kids' lives that loved them and genuinely cared about what they were doing and their sort of everyday, the things that were big for them every day were important to, a bunch of different people that were involved in their life. I felt like that was a really great thing for them to have that support system and all of those people that cared about them and came together. I definitely had some boundaries that I established early on that I stick to, to this day with my kids. I don't miss hockey games, school events. Of course, it happens, occasionally here and there, but I made sure I always did that I was showing up for the big things, and that, my kids had my support. And then there's a lot of little things that you can do day to day and celebrate those little successes, about being there for them in different ways, whether it's a quick chat at bedtime or things like that. So, while there's a trade-off for sure, and there's a balance that has to be there, I think having the wins overall in that balance and knowing this worked out really well. And I'm so happy I was able to juggle that all, today, rather than focusing on the misses and the things that don't happen, is absolutely critical. And I had great bosses, honestly, and people, that respected where I stood on that. And I don't think I would have stayed somewhere that didn't. It was important for me to have both things working really well. And somehow it all came together and worked out. I don't always know how, but it did. And I was able to manage both things successfully.
That's great. Okay. So last, same thing that you had said to me. I want to know your top 3 things to be a strong leader.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to start with clarity and perspective as number 1. So that's really around taking a minute to pause and think about a bigger picture. So I think that's important for leaders to really understand something beyond the day-to-day when you're getting so wrapped up in that, to have the broader perspective on things. Think, is this providing really great business solutions? The second I'm going to say is being adaptable to change. Change happens, and it happens quickly. And I think often, the leaders that really rise up are the people that can adapt change, can move with it, and then spread that to their teams as well, which works really well. And I would say what's often overlooked as the third one is around business and emotional IQ, and really, understanding how to represent yourself in the business space, in the office culture, how to talk to senior leaders and do that effectively are some really great skills to have as well.
Yeah, this describes a lot of the great leaders that I had in my life. So yes.
And our final segment for today is going to be something that we're going to do regularly on our podcast and with our future guests, called Hot Takes and Headaches. And this is where our producer, Meg, is going to rapid fire some questions off for us that we can agree to or disagree to, and see where we both land on them. So I'm going to hand it over to Meg to take things away.
Hi, I'm Meg Caruana. I'm a full-time strategist here at Cairns Oneil and a part-time producer on this podcast. Let's just jump right in. I'm excited to hear your takes. The first one is AI-generated creative will outperform human creative within 5 years. Robin, do you want to kick it off?
My gut instinct goes hard no. And I say that because I don't think that AI is going to get to a place where it can create that same emotional connection with a human that a human can create. AI will definitely have a purpose in taking creative and creating, millions of assets, or, taking that narrative and distributing it, or creating the right assets for the right areas, but not in the story creation.
Right. Kelly?
Completely agree. I think storytelling is the way that brands build. And when we look at, brands that have been successful for a long period of time, like let's say Coke, it's built on storytelling and connection. And those things can't yet be replaced by AI, but a definite purpose for maybe mass output and things like that in the space.
Great takes. Our next question here is definitely an interesting one. Work-life balance doesn't exist at the executive level. Kelly?
I'm going to say we all need more hours in the day to make this work perfectly. But I think there is always some balance with a little bit of give and take here and there on both sides.
Okay, Robin?
Yeah, I think I wouldn't use the word balance. I think balance is a misnomer because some points, family takes priority. Some points, work is a priority. Some points, other things become priority, depending on the day, depending on the week, depending on the month. And you want to be able to show up as your best for each of those. So it's really about making sure that you have the right boundaries in place to create whatever you need to create to be able to be your best in all of those situations.
All right, this is definitely an apt question for me. One piece of advice for those starting out in marketing, Robin.
Stay curious. I think that is something that I look for when I'm looking at new hires is, do they have that curiosity? Do they, ask those questions? And I think that's really important that you maintain that throughout your career.
All right, Kelly?
Just say, raise your hand to do new things, try new things at that stage, and ask what you can take on, what you can do.
It's great advice. Thank you. Last question, and a fun one here. Ad-supported streaming or premium subscriptions, Kelly?
I'm going to say a mix. There are certain things I like without ads, but I definitely enjoy ads in streaming sometimes. I like to make sure I torture my children and make sure they're watching ads as well. But I do enjoy some quick breaks also in my programming. I want to get up and get a drink and a snack and things like that. So I'm a bit of mixture.
All right, Robin?
Yeah, I am also about a mixture. I think, ad supported is important because it is what helps support great content, and, advertising revenue is important for that. But on the same hand, as a busy mom and executive, I only have so many hours in the day to consume content. And sometimes I want that content in a very sort of linear fashion without breaks. So it's going to depend on what it is and how quickly I want to consume it.
All righty. And that's a wrap on that section.
All right. So that was a lot of fun. I hope that everybody listening and or watching enjoyed that as much as we did.
Can't wait for next time when we get to dive into some hot topics with some guests who are really shaping some of the things we're doing in the industry, as well as talking about the landscape and what we're seeing and some exciting things coming up. If you have any questions for us, want to ask anything that we can answer on the show, please feel free to email us at signalsandstories@cairnsoneil.com.
And until next time, I'm Robin.
And I'm Kelly.
And that's a wrap.